Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today is actually a very special and important episode because it is a collaborative podcast today. I am joined by the lovely Nick Lopez, who is a former LAPD officer turned clinical therapist, and he's also the host of Code 3 Industries podcast. G'day, Nick.
Hey, Erin. Thank you for having me. How you doing?
Good, mate. Thanks for joining it. And I'm not quite sure whether Nick knows what he's gotten himself into today because we are actually both also joined by the delightful Joshua Bailey, who is a former podcast guest on I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. Josh is a former Australian police officer. He is an Australian Defence Force veteran, and he's also a provisional psychologist back home in Australia. Hello, Josh.
Hello, once again. Thanks for having me. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've been sort of chatting and circling each other for a little while now, and have sort of been trying to find time to have a conversation. So for anyone listening, we are navigating 3 separate, fairly distant time zones right now. We've got LA, we've got Boston, and we've got Brisbane down under in Queensland, Australia. So we're all, some are drinking coffee, some are drinking God knows what. So you just have to kind of bear with us a little bit. But I thought that maybe we could sort of just give like a little bit of a quick bio, a quick intro as to who we are and what we're about. So all of our listeners are kind of up to speed because Nick and I are kind of going to share this same episode across both of our podcasting platforms. So if you'd like to start us off, Nick.
Yeah, sure. Again, thank you for the intro, Erin. My name is Nick Lopez. I'm a former police officer with the Los Angeles Police Department. I was there for 5 years. And a little bit, just a quick intro about my story is, obviously being a police officer comes with its own battles and struggles, and there's a reason why there's such a hard time with mental health and first responders. And so, that was something that kind of happened to me. And, I reached out for help because I know there's a big stigma in the first responder community. And after I got help, I loved it so much. And I saw that, because there's such a big need, I saw that, that could really be my niche, being a first responder and being able to help others the way I was helped. So I decided to become a clinical therapist and specializing in trauma. And so now I am a former first responder, now full-time clinical therapist.
That's awesome. And I absolutely love that you found that path for yourself. And strangely enough, like all 3 of us are all former police officers and have all gone down that similar sort of mental health path. So there must be something about it.
Right? I think there definitely is. I think there's a reason why we all kind of found this path.
Yeah.
And it's much needed for everybody.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And lovely Josh, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. I was going to say good morning, but hello wherever you are around the world. So thank you once again, Erin, and great to hear your story, Nick. Well done. I think there's some correlation there between all 3 of us with my story. So I started out in Australia, it's the Army Reserves. Then I joined what's called the Australian Protective Service, and they did like a government security officer role, let's be honest, around the airports and sort of Parliament House and stuff. I was on night shift at Sydney Airport when September 11 happened, and then from there I was lucky enough to be on the first ever Air Marshal's course run in Australia. Ran in November 2001, spent time as an Air Marshal, went to the country called the Solomon Islands in 2003, 2004 in like a peacekeeping role there. Joined the AFP, the Australian Federal Police, 2004, left in 2009. Met my wife, Tracy, in the police as well. did a bit more time in the army for about another 10 years after that. And then I left the army, the regular Australian regular army, and then went straight into psychology honours, did honours, and I just finished masters. And now I just completed a couple of job interviews this week to finish off my 6th year to become a registered psychologist. So that's me pretty much. I have a dog,
Congratulations.
I have a wife, and I have a massive HEX debt as well, 52 grand. So if you guys want to do some fundraising.
Hey, I don't think you should be complaining to anyone who's gone through the American schooling system. Trust me.
I heard it's pretty adversarial.
That's like one semester. So.
Oh,
well, maybe 1 year.
Just edit
that. I know, right?
No, I still cry myself to sleep at night thinking about my student loans. So
that's just incredible.
It's brutal over here. Yeah, no, there's a reason I'm doing all of my studying in Australia. Just not for nothing.
You chose a smart route. Yes.
Yes, I might be a bit of a dumb-blonde cliche, but there are certain things I understand, and that's one of them. I'll be like, my kids, you want to go to university? I'm like, you can go home to Oz. Yeah, I know, right? And so for the benefit of Nick's listeners, because obviously my lovely listeners know a little bit of my background and story, but yeah, my name is Erin. I am a former police officer and detective from Victoria in Australia. I was on the job for I think just shy of 9 years. I left as a detective working at the Armed Crime Squad. And I left because I met and crazily married an American firefighter in like a span of 9 months. And so that's what had me leave the force and move over to relocate here in Boston, Massachusetts. So I've been here for the last 10 years. I have 2 little boys, and my husband is still an active duty firefighter here. He is a captain. And I sort of, I guess, really missed helping people. So when I first came over here, I worked at a suicide prevention and crisis counselling organisation, and that was sort of something I'd always like wanted to do and felt really passionately about. And then, I sort of wanted to continue being in a little bit of a helping role, but while navigating a young family and all that kind of thing. So I got life coaching qualifications and decided to become a life and wellness coach to support, the first responder community and sort of, I guess, essentially try to bridge that gap between what peer support can offer and what like a mental health clinician of You Fine Gentlemen can. That's sort of, I guess, lower level counseling coaching role. And I really just enjoy that so much. I obviously host this podcast, and I also host a radio show called Holding Space with Erin and Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, which is a first responder radio network where I do a show that's based on, sharing mental health and wellness tips with the audience. And I'm also, studying psychology and counselling through a couple of different organisations back home in Australia, where my aim is to become an accredited counsellor in Oz and try to, sort of, I guess, offer services in both countries. Because obviously my heart, belongs a lot back there. And I think there is a need. There's a great first responder mental health community here in the States. And I think there's the beginning of one back home in Oz, but I think I want to be able to contribute in both spaces. So this is why I'm here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great to hear. That is a massive achievement to go from one country to another and then throw yourself into something such as helping people with suicidality. It's a big deal to cope with a new environment. I know there's some closeness between Australia and the US, but to go to another country and then move into something as serious as that's very commendable. Absolutely.
Thank you. No, that's...
The other thing too, just quickly, is It doesn't really matter what role you do. It's a therapeutic relationship, and the amount of care and the amount of humanness you can move to another person that really reflects on the amount of assistance you can provide. You don't need to be a doctor in psychology. You can just be someone with a diploma in counselling and still achieve the same outcomes, really. So I wouldn't say anything about being lower level counselling role. It's all about the ability to provide help to someone, and if you can do a better job than me, it doesn't really that's great. It doesn't really matter what qualifications the person has, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I guess it was probably coming more from a descriptive perspective as opposed to like being self denigrating or anything like that. So that's all
We're
right.
Australians. We're known for that, apparently. We're known for that. I hate that shit. I'd like to see people succeed. I really like tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah. No, I know. So, yeah, so obviously 3 different time zones. I think actually Josh connected the two of us together, Nick. Would I be accurate in that?
Yeah, I think
I
so.
I think
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
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 So Josh is a brilliant conduit. He really connects a lot of people. He's just like, oh, I know you and I know you. Like, I'm gonna get you guys together. So which is lovely. And Nick and I had the opportunity to have a conversation. I'm trying to think, like probably within like the last 12 months, and
Yeah.
just
Around there.
just having a chat, getting to know each other a little bit, supporting each other's work, all that kind of thing, and sort of going, yeah, we'll have each other on each other's podcasts. And it just kind of like, he got busy, I got busy, all of the things happened. So I for one am really happy and excited that we're getting this opportunity to have a conversation with each other. And I guess I think we all wish that the circumstances that have sort of drawn us together would be a little more on the positive side, but is such like the nature of our world, and being former police officers and working in the mental health field, there was kind of a precipitating incident that it's still very active and ongoing. So I think we want to come at it from the most respectful place possible, and sort of touch on it briefly, but I guess maybe just explain the fact that it's kind of, how would we say, maybe we're using it as the genesis to have a conversation about line of duty deaths. But in case anyone isn't aware of what I'm talking about, from the time that we're recording this, in the last 48 hours, there were 2 police officers from Victoria who were shot and killed whilst executing a search warrant on a rural property in Victoria. And a 3rd officer was also injured from a gunshot wound and has undergone surgery and is believed to be recovering. But obviously it's a significant tragedy for our state, our community, and our country in general. I think Nick and I were having an offline conversation that Australia is a little different to America in sense of we just kind of have one big state police force. We don't kind of have all the little sort of pocket ones that American cities and states tend to have. So when something happens to an officer in a state in Victoria, it sort of impacts like thousands of members because we're all part of the same department. And that is definitely something that has occurred in this incident. It's been pretty devastating for the state. The offender is still at large. So I guess we want to address it in more of a sense of, talking about line of duty deaths perhaps in general. And I do also want to acknowledge it's really, unfortunately and sadly, like quite a common occurrence here in the United States. and maybe you can speak to that a little bit better than I can, Nick, but there was even just an officer lost in, I think it was the Kansas City Police Department in the line of duty just yesterday. So I think it's kind of what drew us together to want to talk about how line of duty death affects the policing community in general, the first responder community in general, and perhaps talk about, from the clinical mental health perspective of not only people as clinicians, but also people who have worn the uniform, worn the badges, and done some of the similar roles. To maybe you guys can speak about what are some of the common things that occur in the aftermath of these, and what can maybe be of help to people who may be struggling in the aftermath.
Right. And again, I'm very sorry to hear about the loss of your officers back home. And, like what you were talking about, unfortunately, it is a fairly common occurrence here in the States for something like that to happen. But I think something like that, just, line of duty deaths, especially in law enforcement. I mean, there's a reason why it's called like the Blue Line Brotherhood. Because when you sign up to be a first responder, specifically in law enforcement, you may work for different departments, but you're all there to do the same job, right? Which is to protect and serve, your community. And so when a fellow officer, whether it be from your own department or other departments, it really hits you. Just knowing, because just the major risks that come with the job. Because, when you walk out the door, you go and you put on that uniform, you don't know if it's going to be the first and last time you wear it. And, so when an officer dies in the line of duty, I think the biggest thing that happens, it feels like it tentacles out, right? So first, I think it comes within the department, maybe the active unit or that it occurred with, I think plays like the biggest role, and if just complete shock, right? And then it just kind of branches out in between, like others who were on duty that day to higher ups to, and then a department wide, and then stretches out to like the community itself. And it's just everybody handles it differently, and it's just. But I think the most part is just the absolute shock that I think comes with it. That I think everybody's, it's like you hear about it on the news, and you know what you sign up for, and you just sometimes you never think that, oh wow, like this affects me like, personally. And so there's a lot that happens. Like I said, usually shock, and then really trying to be able just to process what happened. And that comes in different stages. I know Josh could probably talk a little bit about it as well, from like just a psychological standpoint of like ground zero, of when the event happens, what occurs directly after, and then just kind of branching out from there as far as like just being able to render psychological aid and help process just what occurred, because again, it's not only going to be the unit itself, it's going to affect everybody department wide, and then other departments around, and it's something unfortunate that it happens way too often.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you raised some good points there, Nick. I just want to break down, just move into, before we get into the broader constructs of why certain members of the public behave the way they do, and politicians versus society and vice versa. I just want to break it down to individual, because that's where we can pass on the most sort of tips. People listening. So if we start with the horrible events on Tuesday Australia time, so 48 hours ago, that event has gone for a short period of time. But as a human being, you've got pre-event, the event, which may go for minutes or seconds or hours, and then for the rest of your life, you're in the post-event stage. Now, that post-event stage is going to go for years, decades, however long. But in that pre-event stage, you may have experienced several traumas beforehand. You may have experienced none, So You may experience the cascade effect in that event vicariously because you knew someone in the public order and riot squad. You may have known one of the policemen that unfortunately died. He was in the public order and riot team. You may have already known him, so that's already going to affect you because you've lost a colleague that you know personally, which is different to lost a colleague that was simply in your jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got incidents leading up to the actual traumatic event, which load on top of you like a sandwich. Then, for the rest of your life, you're in the post-event stage. But then that post-event stage is going to be loaded onto a sandwich by the next serious event as well. So this event, as horrible as it is, we all hope that it's not going to be that bad ever again, but it may well be again. So, as horrible as that is, how do we mitigate negative effects of that? So, I guess from there's going to be, let's talk about the normal feelings that we have around a traumatic event. So we've got sadness, sorrow, grief, which is a more deeper feeling of sadness and can go on for longer and it can be quite maladaptive. Anger, anxiety, fear for the future, resentment, regret. What if I went instead of someone else? What if I didn't take a day off? What if I had said, yeah, I'll go along, or whatever it is? Survivor guilt. Got all those things. And then as a result of those thoughts, because your thoughts become behaviors, the more extreme the thoughts, the more extreme your behaviors can become. So you can't control the thoughts that come into your head. You can control what you do with them and what you choose not to do with them. Yeah, you've got a choice. So one of the things I would say is your behaviors are probably going to be extreme after a traumatic event. We'll take this one that the guys in Vic Pole are going to be, traumatized by. Probably going to want to do things like, alcohol, and on the other end is a lot of physical activity. Either or, it's probably a dichotomy. We're either drinking heaps or we're going to the gym heaps. Fair enough. Now, what I would say to monitor that is it's the severity, the duration, and how often it occurs as well. So severity, how much you're drinking or how much physical activity you're doing, how long you're doing it for, and how often you're doing it for. So they're the three things you need to watch out for in yourself and watch out for in your mates. Now, it's perfectly okay for your listeners. Now, it's perfectly okay to go out and get absolutely hammered. Cool, we've all done it. We do it on Anzac Day, New Year's Eve, Veterans Day. We all down with that. We're all human beings, absolutely. But it's when it starts affecting you and you're doing those really adverse behaviors specifically because it's tied to that traumatic event, then it becomes an issue. Yeah. So by all means, go out and commemorate your friends or mourn or wind down. But there has to be a threshold at which point you have to accept that, okay, this is becoming a problem, or I need help in adjusting to my new normal. Because post-event for these people is now your new normal, and the post-event is the rest of your life, which can be decades for some people. And that's if we don't come across any more serious incidents. So like a sandwich, they just layer on top.
Yeah.
Sandwich will become more and more messier if you don't sort it out. So what can we do with that? My recommendation is to do exactly that. Do what you would normally do, go with your mates, have a few beers, have a couple of Jager bombs, whatever it is. You allow the grief, sorrow, sadness process to occur. Police officers, as general rule, they all talk anyway, so you've got that sort of communication down pat. Everyone talks to each other. Might be a crock of shit, it might be true. It's communication that matters. It's the closeness that you get into. Mm-hmm. From there, now here is a segue into where the organisation supports its people. It is generally not accepted, at least in Australia, to go and see a psychologist and have the organisation know about it. That is the unfortunate circumstance. That is another separate issue to the incident that happened in Victoria. But so seeking help, either ringing your mum, your husband, wife, third cousin twice removed, seeing a counsellor, paying for a psychologist, listening to podcasts, yoga, surf therapy, doing something with the goal of getting you back to traumatic event settings. Because once you've hit that traumatic event, your heart rate goes up, your stress level goes up, your anxiety can go up because you're concerned that something like this may happen in the future. And so you're using the knowledge gained in order that it doesn't happen in the future. So you could be catastrophizing. Mm-hmm. So working on mindfulness, so box breathing, looking for evidence for certain thoughts, that sort of thing there. So even if you see a GP for what we call an Australian mental health treatment plan, and you get to see someone outside the police force, that's my recommendation. It's quite... I wasn't in Victoria Police, I was in ACT Police, which is part of the AFP. So even just talking about the fact that 2 people turned up getting shot, I think the idea that you can turn up in a country like Australia and not come home in such a violent way is something that we're all grasping with. But
yeah,
they're my recommendations, is to allow the natural thoughts of sorrow, grief, sadness, however you deal with that, but understand if it becomes too often, too much, for too long, and it's tied straight to that event, and the whole reason you're doing your destructive behaviours is because of that event, then it's time to go and talk to someone. Otherwise, your work's going to be affected, your family life's going to be affected, your health's going to be affected, and if you really don't like this bloke who's engaged in that behaviour, don't give him any more of your time than you have to. That's how I would say. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. That makes sense. And something I think while you both were talking too, that I think was sort of relevant to mention is also, as much as this is impacting the policing community, not just in Victoria, but sort of almost like countrywide, from sort of everything I'm seeing and hearing. You also have to think about like the dispatcher, we call them D24. So the people who were taking the phone calls, hearing the radio transmissions, all that kind of thing. There's that vicarious secondary trauma that can occur. You've got the ambos who are rocking up on scene, treating the members. There's the kind of, what would you call it? Like how it kind of all filters out. I think there's like and also like this, again, I don't want to be disrespectful and talk about it too much, but this guy hasn't been located yet, and so there's a whole city that is essentially still on lockdown as a result, because they don't know where he is. He fled into the bush, and so there's that kind of community level of fear too that I think is going to be hard to reconcile for a lot of people. There were kids at school and all different things, and everyone, just because this happened like broad daylight, so this whole city just got shut down and no one knew what was going on. So there's a significant level of fear, I think, associated for not just the first responder community, but for the wider community as well.
Yeah, it's I think you've made that point beautifully, in the sense that it affects the community as a whole, and also the lack of control that people would perceive to have around such a circumstance as this, because unfortunately, as human beings, anyone can kill another human being. We all have that capability, and so what that means is people like this absolute clown. You can look like anyone, I've seen him on TV. He just looks like an average bloke. But I mean, the media does paint this guy as someone who's delusional. Down with that. But if I walk past him in the street, I wouldn't go, that bloke's an absolute delusional psycho. You wouldn't know. And that's the concern that we have as a society, is you just don't know by looking at someone whether or not they're going to engage in such serious conduct.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering, and Nick, you might actually be able to speak to this better than Josh and I can, because we had one significant gun violence incident in our country, and they significantly changed our gun laws. So people can still access firearms, but it's not as readily available as it is in the United States. It's not part of our constitution, anything like that. I think given the nature of what's happened in this incident, and like you guys were talking about, like the different ways that we can react and respond, especially as police officers, I can imagine that, that their levels of hypervigilance would be off the charts, especially at the moment, but equally in the aftermath, this offender, I will not call him what I want to call him, is known what's called like a sovereign citizen in Australia, who essentially believe that the laws of the country don't apply to them. And so I'm imagining, like, I dealt with sovereign citizens when I was a police officer. They were challenging is a polite word for it, to interact with. Talk to me, mate. And, Nick, you obviously worked for one of like the probably biggest police departments in this country. Maybe you could speak about the hypervigilance that perhaps you can, see either at, like, our officers back home experiencing, or maybe from your own perspective, that kind of every interaction that you had with a member of the public, especially in this country, there's every chance that they were armed, and that's just not our experience.
Yeah. And I think you said it pretty well when you said challenging, I think is the right word, because we definitely had our fair share of run-ins with sovereign citizens as well. But yeah, that does give me a different perspective, just from what you guys were talking about, like people maybe not being as armed, or because of gun laws that are different in Australia that are different here. And then even from that perspective, gun laws are different and vary state by state.
Yeah.
And so even then, there is a very big sense of hypervigilance when it comes to law enforcement, especially here in the States. I think it's kind of drilled into you in the academy. Always knowing, always scanning people, always looking at your surroundings, scanning waistbands when you're on traffic stops, when you're on radio calls, that hypervigilance, it's part of the job. And I think, unfortunately, in being so hypervigilant, it already adds to the ridiculous amount of stress that comes with being a first responder. And you already know, like what Josh was saying earlier, just some of the symptoms that occur, like after, a traumatic event such as an officer-involved shooting. So you have all these things that come with already on the daily of being a first responder: the hypervigilance, the dealing with possibly armed suspects, dealing with, citizens on their worst day, witnessing the violence, the chaos, the trauma that the average citizen doesn't see. And then on top of that, you have a line of duty death that just occurred. So now everything, kind of like what Josh was saying, that you have all this sandwich that you're already dealing with on a daily basis. And now you have this extremely traumatic event just because of how close it is in regards to you. And so now everything that you've dealt with as a police officer and things that you may have been already dealing with, now you have this. And then everyone reacts to these traumatic events differently. These types of the symptomology may either escalate, or it may channel into something else, whether it be like what Josh was saying. It could be alcohol abuse. It could be even more extreme hypervigilance. It could be insomnia. It could be,
maybe withdrawing as well.
Yeah, exactly. It could be withdrawal. It could be depression, loss of sexual libido. It manifests in so many different ways. And so it's something that, again, here in the States, hypervigilance is definitely just one of the components that comes with being a police officer, especially in a major metropolitan city. And that's not to say that it can't happen on, just some super small agency out in the middle of nowhere. Because I mean, there's going to be criminals, anywhere and everywhere. But it just goes to show that anyone wearing a badge of gun, it doesn't matter if it's here in the States, Australia, anywhere. It's just something that comes with the job, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, like, I think we're taught by nature and our training and everything like that to be a certain level of hypervigilance, because we are always kind of meant to be essentially scanning for threats and trying to see things that most other people wouldn't see. But even you talk about blokes who've, been retired for 20 years and they still sit in the particular position in a
Right.
restaurant, say they can clock the exits. Like, I've been out for 10 years now, and I know I'm still like constantly like scanning my environment, being aware of surroundings and all that kind of thing. But I think the main thing that it always makes me think of is like, it's just exhausting. Like, that
It is.
level of hypervigilance is so incredibly exhausting. And it's, to take you off in a very, very minor tangent, it was actually something I was discussing with my firefighter hubby the other day. And I kind of hadn't realized it, but there's a very significant difference of when I visit home in Australia and as opposed to when I'm here in the States. And there's a certain level of hypervigilance, and I put it down to, and it's not to catastrophize, right? But I'm a person who, I didn't grow up here. I never imagined or envisaged having children here or anything like that. And now, my kids go to American schools and we go to cinemas and sporting events and concerts and shopping centers. And I can't think of a place or any kind of situation where there hasn't been an active shooter event. And like today, it was at a school and a church in Minneapolis, where a shooter went and killed 2 kids and injured a significant amount of others. Like, there's a level of constant hypervigilance and just like mental gymnastics that I know that I go through every time I take my kids somewhere. And like, when it's just me, I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. But it's like when I go somewhere with my kids, and it's changed as they've gotten older. Because, I used to have my little one in a baby carrier. So I'd be like, okay, well, I'll have one on the front and I'll put my little one on my back and we'll run. And I'm always clocking exits. And now my eldest is 9 and my little one is about to turn 6. So it's like, so now the mental gymnastics of, okay, so I probably can't carry the 9-year-old, but I can still carry the 6-year-old. So he's going to go on my back, and then I'm going to grab hold of this one's hand and then run like the wind. It's that kind of hypervigilance that I don't know whether it's because I was a cop or because I'm not Native American that I kind of think about that kind of thing. But I noticed a significant difference that I just realized. And I was saying, talking to my husband about it, that I'm like, I never think like that when I'm at home in Australia. And it's remarkably relaxing.
So the question I have for you, Erin, is would you, if you didn't have any knowledge about America through the media, would you turn up to places in America where you live? Would you be so hyper vigilant? If you just turned up, no idea about America, you just like, my husband lives there, new town, new country, everyone speaks English, we have similarities, but you didn't know anything about the mass shootings or anything like that, would you still be hyper vigilant?
Good question. I mean, we have guns in our house. My husband's a hunter. So, I mean, I've seen more guns in the 10 years I've lived here than I probably ever did back home. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, it's definitely obviously my mind ticks over about it, but I think it's because I would rather that it did and I was prepared.
Yeah.
instead of ignoring, because I can't ignore what I know.
So remember early on, just quickly, when we were talking about
Well,
pre-event.
am I about to get a therapy session?
No, not really. Just for all the listeners and that. So what you've done is you've highlighted what we were talking about before, where we've got pre-event, event, post-event, and we've got that sandwich where you've been to an event, a critical event, and now you're continuously looking out for others. So you're loading yourself up because you're in that post-event stage for the rest of your life. So there's that hypervigilance because you're believing that if you are prepared for the next event, you'll be safer. And then also leading into what we were talking about with this absolute goose before, the what's it called, a sovereign citizen, probably been radicalized through what he's seen through the media. So the media plays a part in Western society and how we see ourselves within the world and how the world, social norms. Yeah. So would you be so concerned if the media wasn't talking about violent acts every day? Has it preloaded you?
That's a good question. I think just the fact that it's very obvious to me that I wouldn't be experiencing the overwhelming desire to have to be prepared to protect my kids in that way. Like, we all want to protect our children, especially as mothers, we grow them, we do all of like the things, we give birth to them. So there's, that innate sense of wanting to do everything. But if it was never reported, well, probably I wouldn't know about it. But then you have Uvalde and you have Sandy Hook, and so it's like it's more the fact that if it was just in adult environments, I think it would be different. But I think it's the tragedy and the sorrow that children aren't immune to having to go through this. My kids have to do active shooter lockdowns.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Which, in a way, I'm glad that they do, because then there's a muscle memory learned practice that they know to do. But it also is fucked up that my kids have to do that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've only lived in Australia my whole life. Been overseas 4 times for work, but that's not a living situation. That's just living in compounds and you get stuck. But actual living, that's, as an Australian who's lived here my whole life, that's just totally alien. That's not even. I mean, it can be
alien to
obviously
me too.
a thing, but it's another thing. And you can still be worried and not actually experience a traumatic event. You're just worried about experiencing one, let alone dealing with it as well, Yeah. So it does put people at a higher level of agitation, I suppose, or operating,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's.
No, I was just about to ask, because it all changed after Columbine. How old were you, Nick?
Columbine, gosh, that was
99.
early 90s. 99. I was like 6 years old. And even then, like after Columbine, because that was like really the first major, like the school shooter, like that was the first anyone had ever really heard of something like that. And even when I was growing up, even after that occurred, being a millennial, we obviously knew about Columbine. And again, this is kind of in that age between like cell phones, mass media, things like that wasn't really a big thing. So we never really had active shooter drills or anything like that. Even like elementary, going into like middle school or so, I think towards like the end of high school, it was more like it's become into the mainstream. It's gotten more into the mainstream, just about active shootings that have gone on in schools. But even then, it wasn't really too much. It was actually, I think, right around the time that I got out of high school. That's when like you started hearing about like Sandy Hook, and then with just everything going on in the world, and just everyone having to the cell phone and everyone, media was like at an all-time high. So then you really start hearing about every single event that occurred in the school and shootings. And then it was really, I think I was already in college at the time, but then you really started to hear about, okay, schools are implementing, these lockdown drills, these active shooter drills, which, again, talking to you guys and just seeing it from kind of a global perspective, that this is really a challenge that's unique to the United States. And and again, right, it's all about it, it causes a very polarizing topic about guns and gun laws and restrictions, background checks, and it's this whole idea of like, it's good to have active shooter drills and being prepared for something like that. But at the same time, it's like this question of why should we even have to prepare for that in the first place? And again, and I'm not here to cause like an international, like this big polarizing conversation, but it's just like, it's reality, right? It's a reality that's very unique to the United States. And from hearing from you guys, just from like the Australian perspective, that's not even a thought that occurs. And so it opens my eyes to really see just how unique this is of a circumstance here in the United States as compared to other parts of the globe.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I think even like, sorry, I did take us off on a bit of a wild tangent. I apologize for that.
No, these are great topics to talk about. It's because it's real, right? It's things that are going on, and it has to be talked about.
Yeah, but I think as well, like we were saying, I probably should have before we jumped on, but there have been like, how do I say it? Like this loss of 2 officers back home is something that is going to stay with our force for like the end of time. Like there have been notable murders of police officers, especially obviously the ones that I know about from our police force. There was just the anniversary of Silk and Miller, which is a very famous one for Victoria Police, Tyne and Eyre, which was the Wall Street ambush killings. Like we're talking like 20, 30 years ago, and these are still things that are talked about. There was the Russell Street bombing, and I guess I kind of look at the juxtaposition of, and I know there are so many police departments in America and the population is, like 10 times that of Australia. So dynamics are obviously going to be incredibly different, but I don't think a week goes by where we don't hear about an officer being killed in the line of duty, or some kind of some variety of first responder perhaps taking their own life. Like the level of loss is significant, but like you're saying, it kind of, I don't want to denigrate anyone's loss, but it kind of just gets like caught up in the wash of like, not white noise, but there's just so many. You kind of, like there were
commonplace.
Yes, and that in itself is shocking, I think, too.
Yeah, it's yeah, and I think, and please, tell me just from your guys' perspectives, being officers abroad too, like I know here in the States, I mean, there's been a first responder, specifically in law enforcement, the suicide rate, the divorce rate, substance abuse rate are just incredibly high, just skyrocket high. And I feel like, it's still at a tremendously higher rate. Things are getting talked about. And I think that's why we all got into this profession, to help in that effect, but it's still so incredibly high in this profession. And I can only speak for here in the States. Like, how is it over there? Like in Australia, do you guys face similar like statistics when it comes to law enforcement?
Yeah. Josh, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I have to be honest. There was in the police force, at least here, it's pretty much the police versus the public. And it probably shouldn't be that way, but police officers mainly associate with police officers, especially if they're single. Can depend on the age, but for the most part, alcohol, because it's legal, you can still drink You can wind down watching, say, the football, the cricket, the soccer. You drink with that.
And Australia has a very significant drinking culture too, which
that's right.
help in that sense.
You would drink with your mates at the end of some shifts. See, the thing is with policing is you do shift work, so then your weekend might be Monday, Tuesday. So you're out on a Monday, Tuesday night smashing it, and then you're back at work on a Wednesday night, and then you might have a Sunday, Monday, and it might go on, So you'll drink whenever you get the chance, and when you're drinking with friends, and you're actually having an enjoyable time, as opposed to what's happened there, because you are always recovering. Because that incident might be the incident, but you're post-incident, and then you have another one, you're post-incident again. You're always post-incident, which means you're always in that understanding what's happening. You're always into that registering the incidents and then trying to recover from them. So you just keep drinking and then keep drinking, and then maybe you'll find yourself in somewhere that's a lot softer, like service and processing or police communications or media or somewhere. But for the most part, from a bloke's perspective, no one wants to do that. They want to be in the thick of the action. So you're always trying to process an incident, because you're always going to one. So you're always in that post-event. Your entire life, you're either in the event or post-event. Next, it's the event, post-event. Your pre-event life finished when you joined the police force, unfortunately.
Right.
You're always looking for outlets.
Yeah.
Right.
The outlets are alcohol and either physical activity. A lot of people get into physical activity, which is great. But are they doing it to wind down? Or are they doing it because they want to keep fit? That's up to the individual. But they're always escaping the event. If they weren't undergoing or experiencing such traumatic events, then they probably wouldn't be drinking at the amount they are doing it at the, the severity, the intensity, the frequency probably wouldn't be there of the amount of drinking they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but I think like sort of Nick was saying, I think mental health is definitely a significant challenge for the first responder and also the veteran community back home. I think just the differing amounts of, as in the population of our forces compared to that of America, like the statistic based, I think America has more significant numbers, but I don't know if you sort of broke it down to, like equalize out the numbers, but I think we still definitely have members from all domains. There was I think a rescue firefighter just the other day in Victoria, like a couple of days before this incident, completed suicide. I think there's, I know that the paramedics are struggling quite significantly in this country.
Yeah.
There was Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was an investigation or a royal commission into the suicide rates of veterans post global war on terror, and from my understanding, we've lost more veterans to suicide than we lost in active duty in the 20 years of the war on terror.
I think you're right there, Erin. So we lost about 500 of blokes in Vietnam, and some of those were conscripts, which mean they were sent over there. So we're talking about operational service here. And then we lost 2 Australian Protective Service officers in the Solomon Islands, respectively, 2004, 2010. Lost a couple of, I know one RAR lost a bloke in Somalia in 1993, I think. I think we lost at least 2 in East Timor, 42 in Afghanistan. It was 41 in combat, and then there was 1 who completed suicide. As far as I'm concerned, there's 42 soldiers we lost over there. There was at least 1 in Iraq. So the figures I'm talking about here are nowhere near I think it was 1,274 or something, suicides that have been completed that we know of since 1996 or 97. It's pre-Timor. So for us, it was 1999. What am I talking about there? 550, 570 people, compared to 1,200 who have died by suicide that we know of. So essentially, we could say there is, would those people have died by suicide if they weren't affected by their service? We'll never know, but certainly they didn't commit suicide before they joined the Defence Force. So the only option, really, the most sensible option, as difficult as it is to grasp, is they're affected by their service and now they're no longer with us.
Yeah,
so is that
and
an
I think
organizational failure? I'm pretty sure it is.
Well, yeah, and like I think you're saying, you know, you can't state causation, but there's definitely correlation, and I think it points to the fact, and I think it, you know, there's similarities over here as well, that there's no unified response to any kind of mental health crisis that either first responders or active duty members or veterans are facing, or, you know, some departments are getting it right, but majority aren't. There's still obviously a significant amount of stigma attached to, you know, reaching out for help or admitting that you are struggling, like Nick sort of, you know, spoke about at the top of the show. So I think that is an unfortunate thing that both countries have in common, that we are losing members to suicide, and seemingly without end.
Right. And I think, and again, please tell me if you guys have heard or experienced anything similar. A unique kind of challenge that I've also heard is that, and I've spoken to several officers who this has happened to already, is they've gone out and they've tried to seek help on their own therapists, and it's because of the inability to relate. Their therapists can't relate to their profession. They've tried to tell them their problems, everything that is going on the job, and their therapists are like, I don't know, I really can't relate. I don't know how to treat you. And so that already, the stigma of trying to reach out for help, and then they go to someone who they feel they can't relate to, or feels like, I don't know what the hell to do with you. Yeah. And then they withdraw back and like, well, shit, what am I going to do now? Like, I'm trying to reach out for help, and the only ones that can really relate to what I'm doing are other people on the job with me who are going through the same thing. And here I am trying to reach out for help in a professional capacity, or someone like a mental health clinician. And because they haven't been a veteran, or they haven't been a police officer or a first responder, they have no idea what I'm going through, and I can't relate to that, and I really can't tell them my problems. And so that is something I was just wondering if you guys have experienced, because that is something that I've been seeing here.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I think cultural competence is a really important notion that I think is talked a lot about more over here, and I think perhaps it's starting to get spoken about back home. I look at it like, I think there's a reason all of us have gone down that sort of path, because we do know the challenges of wanting to reach out for help, and like Nick, like you're saying, people not understanding. So I don't think someone necessarily 1,000,000% needs to speak to someone who quote unquote gets it, because that isn't always going to be a requirement for every single first responder. But I think it's incredibly beneficial if there are more of us available, so that there is the higher chance that they are going to be able to find someone who does have that level of understanding of what it is like to perform a first responder role, what their day-to-day looks like, what the dark humor aspect, what our sort of unique, you know, like what does Dr. Chris Frey call it? Like the allostatic load, what that kind of looks like, how it presents, how it affects our, you know, our bodies somatically, all that kind of thing. I think sometimes, you know, we can have a better understanding of how that ongoing cumulative trauma can show up in first responders in that way. But Josh, you may have a
I've just back. That was excellent what you said, Erin. Thank you so much. I've got a real life sort of incident to talk about when you were saying, Nick, you turn up to your therapist and they've got no idea what you're talking about. I was involved in a car accident in 2008 on the job. We were in the police car. It was a marked one. We were on our way to what's called an offenders on premises, i.e. people are breaking in and with lights and sirens, we're going to save the day and the world's going to stop. We're going to save the day. We're in the house, with sort of thing. Anyway, we crash, not expected. And then I'm like, okay, that's not ideal. Anyway, we're both in hospital, no dramas. I get out. The driver's still in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I go and see a therapy providing company. I walk in, first session, talk to the lady, and she goes, whoa, well, hang on. No, this sounds like an organisational thing. No, I'm sorry, I've just got a diploma in counselling. I'm not a psychologist. Go back and talk to the AFP about it. This doesn't, I can't help you. So I was talking to her about the car accident I was in, just for the listeners, driving about 120 kilometres an hour, which is, I'm guessing, 70 miles.
Yeah, 70-ish, yeah.
We hit a sign, hit a concrete light pole, which kind of not ideal. And then we smash into a tree. The driver's side door is ripped off. The pole came down at such a velocity it actually cut the steering wheel in half, and the driver lost a couple of fingers. And the driver says to me, I can't move. And the horn's blasting. I'm like, well, this is kind of not ideal. And it's raining. So I go to use the radio, but my radio had been ripped off in the crash. So I kicked my way out of the car and I ring 000. Now, I just met Tracy 4 weeks beforehand. So I ring 000, which is the Australian version of 911. Tracy goes, oh, hi, hun, how are you? And I'm like, I don't have time for this shit, So I had to ring 000 and she'd answered. You could hear the horn in the background and the quite serious. Anyway, she got cut out of the car. They tried to take the roof off and stuff, and they realised that they couldn't fuck around because she was going to die. And so I'm there talking to I explained this to except slower, because at that time I was undergoing some sort of traumatic, I was really struggling with it. The more you struggle, the more challenging you are with telling your story, and it's not in a linear fashion.
Yeah.
I'm telling this lady. Anyway, she's like, whoa, no, sorry, this is an AFP thing. Fucking see ya. So I went back and told what was called the welfare officer. So the AFP, since, 2003 or whatever, have had a welfare officer, and they look after people's, welfare. And then that was that. I wasn't offered another counsellor or anything. It was just, thanks for letting us know that the provider's not providing their service, and we'll do something about it. And that was it. That was the way it was. So that's absolutely what happens. So it's interesting how across two countries the same thing happens, where the therapists, at least in our instances, what we've discussed weren't really, those competencies weren't up to that we needed them to be to deal with the situations we deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there seems to be a lot of former first responders making their way into the mental health space. And so I think it can only, be a good thing. And I was even communicating with the lovely Alana that she's a psychologist, social worker, police social worker. Yeah.
Husband's in the New South Wales Police. Yeah.
Yeah. So, she's sort of wanting to work on a culturally competent list to collate that kind of stuff. So it is like, when people reach out, she's like, I get people reaching out from, all over the country. Like, I want to be able to send them to appropriate providers. And like, Nick, do you know of the Overwatch Collective?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue. Yeah.
I was just going to say they have sort of like a bit of a list compiled. I'm not sure if it's in like every state, but they're sort of at least in sort of up to 30 or 40 states where they've got like listed culturally competent and vetted providers for the first responder community.
Yeah. Yeah. They're a great organization to be able to connect any first responder who might be looking for therapeutic help or just mental health clinicians. Yeah, they're an awesome company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I'm just looking at them now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We could start something like that in Australia.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile and beneficial, because there's even like my sister works for a trauma foundation in Victoria that have a program that is specifically for first responders and veterans and stuff like that. So there is stuff, but I think there can always do more.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
It's nice that I think finally mental health's really coming to the forefront over the past like several years. There's a long way to go, but I think it's could definitely come a long way of just really helping to break the stigma and really, capitalizing just on, everything that goes on in the life of a first responder, and just, being able to show that, it's okay to not be okay. So it's great to see.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's kind of, the point of why like I started my podcast and meet people like you, Nick, and you, Josh, and have these conversations, because I think it's like I talk about, some like, or I share, some of the aspects from my personal life or my service and all that kind of thing, because I'm comfortable sharing it, but not a lot of people are. But so when we have these kinds of conversations where people share their experiences, share their struggles, and equally sort of shared like what helped them, because there isn't a one size fits all. There's not one modality of therapy and treatment that's going to be right for everyone. There's no one, magical clinician that has the answer. Everyone's experiences are obviously subjective. So I think it's about kind of having these conversations and just putting it out into the community to kind of go like, there's a lot of people struggling, and this is the reasons why, and it just means that you're human. And that's as simple as it is. So it kind of needs to continue breaking down the barriers of people maintaining that, outwardly stoic disposition, which, I think my husband's probably one of them. But, you can be all this like stoic on the outside, but yet if you're crumbling or struggling on the inside, like what's that false mask, disposition doing for you? It's not doing you any benefit, and I doubt it's doing your relationships and marriages and work-life balance or anything any benefit. So if you just need a little bit of a helping hand, like it's kind of what we're all trying to work towards, and what we want to generate in this kind of mental health and wellness community. The fact that like you're saying, it is okay to reach out for help, and it doesn't mean that you're weak, and it doesn't make you vulnerable. Sometimes it's one of the most courageous things you can do, is to throw your hand in the air and be like, holy shit, I'm just having a tough time. What's going to help me get through it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't feel as if there's anything such as a low level counselling role, because education does not equal proficiency. So if you're providing therapy for someone, then really the most important person in the room is your patient or client, whatever you want to call them, and understanding and humanising them, to understanding how best to understand where they are now, and how to get them where they want to be pre-traumatic settings, and then improve their life outcomes, improve their function, and improve their ability to adapt to their new life post event, which is going to be a challenge, because we're all individuals and each traumatic event is different. So if one therapy such as CBT worked, all we would do is practice CBT. But then you've got EMDR, acceptance therapy, dialectic behavioural therapy, stand on one leg whilst facing north at 5 a.m. over the beach therapy, whatever it is.
It's like, REBT. There's like so many. I think the only people who like acronyms more than first responder are like mental health clinicians.
Yeah, so it's just
Right.
It's also the onus on the person seeing the therapist is, are you accepting therapy just for the sake of it, or are you accepting the best therapist for you? So people need to understand, just because you've been sent to see a psych doesn't mean you have to see them. If they're not working, then go and find someone who is. I am not going to suit absolutely everyone.
Mm.
And I need to accept that.
Right.
That's okay. Not everyone's going to accept, the hot 19-year-old recent uni graduate. But that's okay as well. So you're not going to be...
they might accept it in a different way.
Yeah, well, there you go. So what do you want out of therapy? And then how do you know when it's working? And then, so we're not always going to be the best for everyone, but you can, be the best for the person that you're seeing. And if the person you're seeing, if you're the client and that person's not working out for you, then you need to go see someone else. Otherwise, therapy is not a conversation. It's not a time filler. It's not something you've got on your diary. It's something that you go to for a reason to get back to pre-morbid settings, which is a fancy way of saying pre-traumatic event or whatever's happening to you is happening to you. And if it's not working out, then the onus is on you to go and find someone else. Yeah. Which is a challenging. It's not something we like to say as clinicians or as people trained in therapy, but it's one thing you have to accept. Otherwise, you are wasting time, and that's a harsh reality. But I've been fortunate enough to have two very good psychologists in my life, and I was like, fuck, I'm going to be in psych. Then I've also had other psychologists that have been sent through the army, and I can't remember their names. Yeah. So that's where, one, you need to accept you need help, no dramas. But if you're not getting that help, you need to accept you can find it somewhere else. And that's the difficulty, probably the most difficult thing that people face as clients, which is something we don't talk about. Psychologists aren't going to be suited to absolutely everyone, unfortunately. And I won't be suited to absolutely everyone, and that's okay. But education does not relate to proficiency, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd be fucking awesome.
He ends with a banger. So a previous podcast guest, a lovely guy by the name of Chris Moore, firefighter captain, and he used the analogy that like finding the right therapist is like trying on a shoe.
Yep.
If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And so I obviously like credit him, but then I stole it and like reworked it and turned it into my own. Or it's like, you need to Cinderella that shit. You need to like find your freaking glass slipper, and if that's the one that's going to fit you, that's the best thing that you can do. But I guess, Nick, I'm sort of interested to hear, like, are you sort of serving a lot of either first responders or people in law enforcement when it comes to your client base?
Yeah, so right now I'm kind of in the transition period. Right now it's kind of offline and professional setting that I'm working with first responders. Right now I work with strictly civilians in a professional setting, so I'm kind of transitioning right now to work with first responders in a professional setting. But just like what you were saying, Josh, it's head on. It's whether you're working with like first responders or like with civilians, recognizing as a clinician that you're not going to be the right suit for everybody, and coming to terms with that. And that's totally okay. You're right. Just like, and also, well, I guess I can cover this and then after I talk about this, but coming to terms with that, because I think that's very hard and something that you really don't talk about in school. It's like, after this feeling, especially like when you're a newer therapist and, your client wants to move on and say like, you know what, I don't think it's working out. And then you kind of have this imposter syndrome, like, oh shit, what did I do? Did I really fuck up? Am I bad? Am I shitty? And am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Because it's a journey, right? Therapy is a journey. And it's kind of twofold, right? It's a journey for both people, and trying to find as a client, trying to find a therapist that works best for you, and also knowing as a therapist and kind of really letting your client know that, therapy is not a miracle drug. It's not, I'm going to give you this pill, you do A, B, and C for 3 months and you're going to be all fixed. No, that's not how it is, and it also depends on, what type of clientele. And what I mean by that is, let's just say trauma, like what we've been talking about. You can have three different clients who have similar instances of trauma. One may be processed and okay with everything in 3 months. One, it may take 4 or 5 years. Another one, they may never recover. And that's something else that you really have to think about as a therapist as well, is that everybody may have maybe similar circumstances, but they all deal with trauma and process trauma in their own individual ways.
And the presentations could all be completely different too.
Exactly. Everybody manifests it. Everyone presents differently. That's something that you really have to take into account as a therapist or a clinician, as well. And even if you say they move on from you, you would hope, or at least with me, say there's a list of traumatic things that have gone on, and maybe they feel like they're not the right fit, and maybe you worked on just something small with them. Part of that therapeutic journey too is if they decide to move on, is that, okay, you know what, I opened the door with them into the therapeutic process, and they move on to someone else. And like, okay, you know what, now that door is open, they're already comfortable, at least in this setting, so now they can process something else. And maybe say if they keep moving on and allowing them to continue this therapeutic process and this journey that allows them to heal with, whatever they're going through. And that's something I found myself, really kind of seeing firsthand as being a therapist, and, seeing clients come and go, whether it be like they felt like they process and their time is done here, or they're like, you know what, I think this may not be the right fit for me, and I'm going to try something else. But at least knowing as a therapist in this professional setting now, with just a little bit of time on knowing that, okay, you know what, I may have not been able to work with everything that they wanted to, to process, but I've at least opened the door for them and allowed them to feel comfortable in a therapeutic setting that they can go forth and maybe find their therapeutic journey somewhere else.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And I think that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to coaching, which I'm not denigrating anything, Josh, but it's that sort of very like lower level of being able to interact with people, because I wouldn't want to be treating someone with significant trauma, because that would be inappropriate for me to be doing right now with the current skills and qualifications that I have. It's obviously where I'm aiming towards. But I think I was just kind of wanting to say, I guess, about one of the things that I like to say is, like, if either A, I'm not your cup of tea, or B, you need more help than what I can provide, it's no skin off my nose, but let me help you in that process of finding that next step, or someone who is more appropriate to help you with, like, if I can help you through some basic stuff, but like, yeah, if you're really having to work through some kind of trauma or something like that, like, let me find you a clinician who is going to be culturally competent, if that's what you're seeking, and help you along that path, which I think, like you're saying, is also part of like the conversation of us not being, the right fit for everyone. Well, so then we need to, which is, like you're saying, sometimes easier said than done, but we need to not take that personally, because even though, that therapeutic relationship that we build, like it is, and it can get like really deep. Like I remember talking to a counsellor I know, and he was like, I explained it to them like it's kind of like we're dating, and he's like, and when it's a dude, they're a bit like, so I always find that rather funny. But I think one of the greatest descriptions in sort of some of the stuff that I've been learning in my counseling classes, and I really liked this. It's essentially, I want to work with you to make myself redundant. I want to get you to a point and help you, recognize the changes you want to make in your life, and help you implement them and support you along that path, and teach you all like the different skills that are involved, so that you're actually able to navigate them on your own. That is the point for you to be able to function down the track. And if something else happens, or you need to come back for a refresher or something like that, like, cool, we can like have a check-in, we can like lengthen the time in between sessions if you really sort of feel like you need like that as a base of support. But I kind of liked the idea of working with someone to the point of making myself redundant, because that means that they have been successful in essentially helping themselves and healing themselves. And I think having that sense of like ownership and empowerment, I think is incredibly important in their healing process. But I think for our first responder population, as people who are more often than not, they enjoy being in charge, and they're typically a lot of those like dominant personalities. Like, I guess that's sort of where I come at it from, that I think it allows them to, sometimes maintain that level of control, which I think is beneficial for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think what you've done there is you've helped them fulfill their goals. So goals have an end date. So if their goal is to increase their functioning or increase communication or increase, finish uni or whatever it is, then you haven't become redundant. You've just helped them achieve that goal. And once a goal achieved, they go on to a new one. And if you're not part of that new goal, then that's okay. Because goals are different to values. Values don't have an end date. They're principles you want to live by, whereas goals do. So goals and values are entwined. Your values are going to be linked in with your goals, and you're more likely to achieve them. So you're just helping people live by their values to achieve their goals, which is a really important thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I don't mind describing it as being made redundant, because I see it as a good thing.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really unique, at least in our profession, right? It's because you want to get to the point where you don't want to be out of a job, but in the sense that obviously we want to be able to help our clients, but at the end of the day, like, you want our clients to be able to go off on their own and to be able either in a healed, in their own sense of being healed, or being able to process in a healthy manner, or feel like they have processed whatever has gone with them, or being able to have the tools to the point where like, okay, I can do this on my own. And I think it definitely it will makes this profession very unique. And also too, I think because obviously as first responders, we deal with a lot of trauma. We see a lot of trauma. We're always constantly dealing with trauma. And now being in this, either as a coach, psychologist, counselor, therapist, dealing with trauma, maybe in form of, just trauma dumping and emotional trauma, and now taking on that trauma, someone else's trauma, and putting it on you. And someone told me, it was one of the psychologists, she said it best, it was really awesome, is that in the profession of being a mental health clinician, whether it be psych, counselor, coach, or anything, don't be a garbage can. Be like a recycling center. Because if you're a garbage can, you're just people are tossing things in at you, and it just fills up and it overflows. And if it overflows with you, it has nowhere to go. But being like a recycling plant, a recycling center, being able to take that, channel it, and put it back out, so it doesn't come back and fill in you. And I thought, that's really clever, because it's really, really true. And being in this profession, we take it upon ourselves to kind of hold that trauma, or help hold, just like the title of the podcast, hold space for you, hold that darkness, hold that trauma, to be able to help others. And then I think it's important for us to also be able to channel that as well. Because it's great that we help others and being able to help them hold and process that trauma, but us as human beings, we need to be able to let that go as well.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you guys have ever dealt with that, either talking to other first responders, or with clients or potential clients, feeling just having those days of, just having a heavy session, with whatever the topic is, and just feeling that you're just kind of emotionally just exhausted or tired after having the session.
Yeah, I have.
You go ahead.
Absolutely. Especially when they're talking about. So you can either talk about things that have occurred in real life, or sometimes some clients can talk about things that are happening in their head and they're wondering whether they should act them out or not. So quite often those people with OCD can have very intrusive thoughts. So they can often believe that if a thought comes in their head and they entertain that thought, then they're labelled in that particular sort of, that they labels themselves as that. So for an example of, I had one client, that person, he wasn't getting along well with his sister, and so he had a thought. He'd actually watched a particular crime show, and in that crime show, a person in the Ferris wheel had died. So two people in a Ferris wheel are in like one of those booth things, and one of the characters had thrown someone out, and they'd landed 30 meters below and died. So he was having those intrusive thoughts in his mind because he couldn't get rid of them. He was thinking, "Oh my God, I keep having these thoughts. Every time I have intrusive thoughts, I act it out because I need to, straighten up the desk, or I need to have a set shower time. I need to have a set breakfast protocol. Everything was set for him. He's like, I can't act this out. If I act it out, I'll get rid of these thoughts." So he was telling me about how he was going to act out throwing his sister out of a thing on a Ferris wheel. And this was pretty, I was like, fuck. And in the end, I'm like, "Mate, got a Ferris wheel in your backyard, mate?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, yes. So that's serious then, because people just don't have Ferris wheels in their backyard. But, he was like adamant, this is the only way to get rid of these thoughts is I'm going to, take care of my sister. And I'm like, whoa, bit ideal, I'm thinking to myself, it's a Friday, it's sunny outside, footy's on later on tonight, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm just going to fucking take out my sister, that was, I've described it colloquially, one, because I'm Australian, but two, because that's how I dealt with it. But it can be really, intrusive thoughts can be more difficult to deal with than when people are describing actual events, because people are living what happens in their minds. We don't describe as a reality, but yet it then becomes their reality if they act out those thoughts, become behaviours. Yeah. So there might be 7 billion people in the world. That means we've got 7 billion realities walking around inside people's heads. So if we've got to discuss one of those, it's hard to get into someone's mind. And that's where therapeutic alliance comes in, actually getting to know someone without judging them. Because the less people feel judged, the more they'll tell you, the more safer they feel. So yeah, for me, I often struggled with dealing with people with intrusive thoughts and how to discourage them from carrying out those thoughts, especially with the higher end of, risk behaviours. But in the end, I spoke to a more senior clinician, and we both decided it was, just thoughts only, and he was having other really serious thoughts as well, which he hadn't acted out. So it was just one of those very heavy clients, like, fuck, I didn't, because it was just so casual. He was just like, "Oh, and by the way, this is happening." Just so casual, like we are now. And I was like, "Righto, mate. Cheers." Yeah.
Mm. I think I've sort of had, obviously, like a few different roles in whatever you want to call it, like the helping field. Obviously, like police officer, I worked on a suicide prevention and crisis counseling organization, on like answering calls and texts from obviously people experiencing suicidal ideation and various different risk assessment heights, and then like now in a coaching perspective, I obviously engage in some pretty heavy conversations, almost like I feel like I was able to transition to the suicide hotline pretty easily because there was a significant level of distance, because it was like when you're a cop, you're actually showing up on scene.
Yeah.
So being on the phone, that sort of not allow me to like disassociate, but a significant level of distance so that it you know, not didn't feel so serious, but I didn't have to go and see and like walk around in the aftermath of it, I guess, or go wait at the hospital for like 4 hours under like the Mental Health Act with an arrest power, only for them to then be let go and all that kind of thing. And I think honestly, like, with coaching, obviously, because of just like the level of where it is a lot more just sort of helping people talk stuff out and goal setting and all that kind of thing. Some of the heavier conversations I think that I have are actually probably on the podcast.
Really?
People
Yeah.
talking about suicide attempts, ideation, like different really significant trauma experiences in relation to their first responder duties. Like they're actually some of like the heavier conversations that that I've probably end up having. And I think, I don't know why, I think showing empathy and being led by empathy, like I am in my private life as well as the life that everyone sort of kind of either gets to see or hear via the podcast or even on the radio show. Like I think showing emotion or expressing that empathy with that person, I think it allows me to kind of process it in the moment, and I can like walk away and go, whew, that was heavy. But for whatever reason, I'm able not to let it sort of weigh me down, because I guess it's like I don't feel like I own it, if that makes sense. So I don't think I need to carry the weight of it. I can feel really compassionately towards the person, and it can, maybe something that I'll think about for a long time afterwards, but I try not to let it burden me, because I think if I couldn't have that level of separation, or like I would consider it a bit of like a healthy disassociation, I don't think I could do the work that either A, I'm doing, or B, that I want to do in the future. So
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, because there's definitely it feels different, like when, like you said, like that level of separation as compared to being on scene and being there, witnessing, seeing, hearing, smelling it firsthand. There's just that energy level it's very different. But no, you're very right.
Yeah, seeing it, seeing it, and be able to experience the events in a law enforcement capacity, and then going in and being a therapist or a counsellor, listening to people deal with those incidents, you've got an idea beforehand, because you've experienced it yourself, or you've experienced the post-event, the pre-event. Because quite often, pre-events can be, it was a nice quiet day, it was really sunny outside, it was a slow day, nothing much was going on, and then this big call came across, and we're like really not knowing what to expect, and our minds were racing, and we got into the situation, and then all of a sudden we're left with our mouths open. We can't hear anything because we were so focused on the situation, can't smell anything. We just did what we had to do, and now we're in shock, standing there going, what just happened? Oh my goodness. Because if you go through a traumatic event you've been through, and I asked you, what could you hear during that time? Could you hear any birds? Could you feel the rain? Could you smell anything or whatever? At the time, you would say no, because that all gets blocked out.
Tunnel vision.
Yep. Everything gets blocked out. So you only know that if you've experienced it. So that's part of the thing. So when people explain their traumatic situations, they're only explaining what they experienced, not what they didn't experience. So you know what they didn't experience and what they did experience, but you know the two had combined. So they're not talking about the weather. They're not talking about how hot or cold it is. They're talking about what happened in that specific point in time, which is only a really small point in time, but it was a small part of what was going on in society they're so focused on. So you've already got a knowledge about what happened, but also what didn't happen as well. And quite often it's the what didn't happen parts that people need to associate back with because they're dissociating without actually realizing. So you as first responders have already got that gift or that knowledge as well, as opposed to someone who's just sitting there going, righto, mate, tell me what's going on.
Or also being able to go like, oh, you know, what were you feeling or experiencing at the time, and think that they're going to have this like wealth of information. Whereas where about you guys, like when you're in work mode, you're in freaking work mode. You're not necessarily feeling anything. You are switched on and you are in that level of stress that is the you know, what's that stupid bell-shaped thing?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yep.
Yorks and yerks
Yep.
and something like that. Sorry, you can tell the student. It's you know, you're in that phase of like really you know, narrowing down and being focused on things. So you're not focusing on what you're feeling necessarily in that moment. That's like an afterthought, which then gets filtered through your cognitions. And so it's also like how you're perceiving it. It's not always what was going on in that time. And we know how we respond and that fight or flight thing, and how attuned we become to it when we've done it for however many years, whereas not everyone's always going to get that, I don't think.
No, you don't. It's like mathematics. You're either doing it or you're not. You can't get better just by reading about it. You have to experience it, and that's the hard thing, you know. So experiencing it, and if people realize that you've experienced similar culture to them, then you'll get more clients. Whether or not they stay is another thing, but people will naturally migrate towards you because you have that experience, which is part of what makes you unique as a therapist as well. That's how I feel about it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too is if you've experienced traumatic events or a culture, you're not going to jump to conclusions. Like if I'm the client and you're my therapist, Nick, and I go, Nick, mate, I was smashing beers the other day and I've been doing it for the last 3 weeks. You're not going to diagnose me with alcohol dependence because the book says, the DSM-5 says, well, this bloke's got alcohol dependence. You're going to have an understanding as to why that's happening, and you're not going to write me off for the rest of my life because I've been drinking too much and I've given up my life the last 3 or 4 weeks. Because you're already going to have an understanding of why that occurs and your ability to function after you've you have processed the traumatic event.
Hopefully. All right. Well, it's given we are navigating 3 different time zones, and it has just clicked over midnight in my time zone. We might, if you fellas are happy, we might wrap it up. I think we do want to make sure that Nick hasn't been too traumatized being thrust into a conversation with a couple of crazy Aussies.
Hey, no,
are you okay? We need to do a welfare check on you.
No, I am. This is awesome. Being able to learn a little bit more about how Aussies operate. This is awesome. So I appreciate it, and hopefully we can do this again. No, this has been awesome.
No, thank you to you both for making the time. And I think, you know, like I mentioned at the start of it, this sort of, I guess, eventuated out of some really tragic circumstances playing out very much in real time back home in Australia. So we'll sort of endeavour to get this episode out and to you, Nick, to be able for you to put it on your platform sooner rather than later, so it isn't you know, dated horrendously depending on what happens in those circumstances. But I guess, you know, we want the overarching message to be that there is a lot of support out there for first responders. Us three are a bit of a rabble, but we are a collection of three very different options of people, who exist in this community in multiple countries with, very different backgrounds, but they all involve policing, and we've all migrated over to the mental health and wellness space because we do care, and we think that first responders deserve people that they can reach out to who are going to understand what it is like to serve in the roles that they do. So we I think we are hopeful for some kind of resolution, hopefully with no other members' lives being taken in the process. And I think equally we can put all of our Instagram handles and all that kind of thing and email addresses. But, if anyone is struggling in the meantime or feeling like they do need access to some resources, I'm sure all of us would be more than happy to answer an email or a DM and try to help someone, whether it is through us or through the network of resources that we probably collectively all know together. If you are
Definitely.
struggling, we will endeavor to get you the right help that you guys need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we will wrap it up. Thank you very much both to Josh and Nick for jumping on, and to the listeners of the Code 3 Industries podcast for letting Nick and I have a little bit of a collaboration here today. This has officially been one of Nick's episodes, and also another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I've been your host, Erin Jane, and as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.